Welcome back, everyone. We've only got one episode left before the finale of Only Murders in the Building Season 4, and it looks like we have our killer, or do we? Now, this next part is from my latest breakdown of episode 9 of Only Murders in the Building, where we learn that Marshall was the actual stuntman protege, but I'm not entirely sure that's all of the actual truth. Before I show you all this next clip, I want to thank you all for clicking on this video. Make sure you hit that like button. Also, share your thoughts on this theory that I'm going to be sharing with you all, but more importantly, share your thoughts about your own theories and what you all hope to see in next week's finale. And last but not least, consider sticking around by subscribing to the channel. I hope you all enjoy this clip, and I can't wait to see what happens in next week's finale. Now, we end this penultimate episode with Marshall outside of Mabel's apartment trying to get some help on the rewrites. Now, while that's all happening, we go back to the restaurant with Ron as he tells Charles and Oliver what actually happened to the stuntman on the set during those flashback sequences. As we see the stuntman walking over to Ron trying to show him some pages to his script, and while this is happening, he didn't realize that he was still on fire, which ended up causing Ron to lose his eyebrows, which ultimately led to him getting fired and blacklisted. Now, within this conversation at the restaurant, we also learned that Ron's on-set special shoes were stolen, the same shoes that matched the prints of earlier in this season on the radiator. Find out that this mysterious stuntman went under the name of Rex Bailey, and we see a picture of him, and it's the one and only Marshall, or should I just call him Rex? Now, back with Mabel and Marshall, she grabs a beer and finds the script for the Only Murders in the Building movie, and the original writer is listed as Sazz. Now, Mabel confronts him about finding this, and she gets a text message from the guys warning her about Rex, and we see that he reads it first. Obviously, now she's not knowing that she's in the room with the killer. Now let's just jump right into the ending and break that down. Now, for weeks, literally since episode 1, I've had my suspicions about Marshall, aka Rex, but honestly, I feel like this is too easy. I feel like there's definitely more to this story. Now, it appears that Rex only agreed to be a stuntman to get on set to have someone read his script for whatever movie or whatever project he was trying to get greenlit. But hear me out. I've been saying that Marshall is just simply playing to act as a writer and actually hiding his true identity. But again, this role requires him to change his hair and his glasses and his beard. Was it me, or was he acting completely different from the timid, somewhat scared version of Marshall that we've seen this whole season? Again, I know he's playing a role, but if we go back to the flashback sequences, Rex came off more relaxed and had a very different vibe, similar to like a surfer bro. Now, before I say what I'm about to say now, I do think ultimately Rex and Marshall will be revealed to be the same person, just for the sake of having a wild theory for the finale. It will never shake the twins theory from season 3, and if you know, you know. But what if Rex isn't Marshall, but they're actually two separate people? Which in return would give us a shooter and a person to move the body into the incinerator. What if Rex and Marshall always had dreams of getting into movies and going into Hollywood, and one of them finally got their big break? But as we saw the situation playing out with Ron and them getting banned from making movies and being on set ruined their career. Leaving one of the brothers, let's assume that it's Marshall, wanting revenge for his younger brother, or again his twin brother, which in return led to the death of Sazz. I know it's a lot to consider, but I just have this feeling that there's gonna be a lot more involved with the whole Marshall Rex situation than meets the eye. And to add more fuel to the fire, pun intended, we see Marshall or Rex killing Glenn, but they don't have the beard on. Now, of course, they don't have it on because they don't want to get caught or noticed. But again, what if this is the other brother that's the killer and the other one's just a cleanup guy? Now, to address the Mabel script reveal at the end of this episode, was this the sensitive conversation Sazz wanted to have with Charles at the end of season 3? She was going to tell him that she wrote a movie without his knowledge or his consent, and she was on the verge of selling the script to Bev, but wanted to first have him read it to get his ideas and see how he felt about it. And in doing so, obviously Charles would have known that the original writer wasn't Rex or Marshall, making him a fraud or at least a thief. Now, to expand upon this script situation, what if Sazz felt bad for Marshall/Rex and wanted to give them a second chance and make it into Hollywood? What if she promised to get an executive to read the script over, but playing devil's advocate, rest in peace to Sazz, we all love her, but what if she betrayed Marshall/Rex? What if she put her name on the script and took credit for the movie, leading to her death or stealing the idea from Marshall/Rex? I know I'm just throwing stuff at the wall at this point, but I do feel like there will be a bigger reveal with Sazz and Marshall and Rex, and there's going to be a lot more to that story. Now, after this episode, here are some questions that come to mind, and I hope they get answered in the finale, and they're in no particular order. I'm just so interested to learn more about this friendship or relationship between Sazz and Rex or Marshall. Was her having him become a stuntman her way of saying sorry for hitting you with my car and please don't sue me? Like, how close were they? How much time they spent together? Are we under the impression that Rex blamed her for getting him banned for those 2 years and he had a grudge over those 2 years and ultimately set up to kill her? And forget about the gun that Detective Williams had, the one that she took from the trio after they got it from Bev, who was waving it at him back at the Paradise. Going back to episode 1 of the season, who was that person that was in Sazz's apartment? Was that Marshall or Rex looking for the original script? Now again, RIP to Glenn, but what was the whole situation with the rats? Again, I had theorized that he was, like, metaphorically speaking, that there's a rat amongst the community of stuntman, but is there more to that story? Will that have a payoff? Now going back to the phone call and voicemail that Sazz left on Bev's phone, was that conversation she was going to have about her script being stolen and that Marshall's a fraud? Now of course we know next week's going to be the wedding, and I would assume we're going to probably get some return characters from the past. Some that come to mind is, where the hell has Oliver's son been? Now we'll most likely get some cameos from celebrities. What about some of Mabel's exes? Also, what about the bride, Loretta? Will she bring her castmate to the wedding? What about her son, Dickie? Which, speaking of appearances, what if Jan makes a special cameo or pops up last minute and explains where she's been this whole time? Which, speaking of Jan and speaking of season 1, who wrote the warning notes to the trio back in season 1? It can't be Rex. I don't think that's the same person, so who was this mystery person? And last but not least, what's the deal with this whole situation with this person that's missing that owns the dry cleaner? Now, as far as my review of this episode go and just my overall thoughts, for this being a penultimate episode, I thought it was okay at best. Now, taking away my Marshall is the killer theory and just looking at the structure of this episode, starting from the framing of the flashbacks, they just kind of felt out of place and very generic to me. Now again, we lost a character in this episode, rest in peace to Glenn. And yes, Paul Rudd is great, I love seeing him in anything, but I wasn't the biggest Glenn fan and I really didn't care too much for the character, so when it came to the death scene, it was just kind of underwhelming for me. Comparing his death to Dudenoff last week, it's almost night and day. Like, I cared way more about that emotional depth than I did about Glenn dying. And then when we look at what the trio was doing this episode, and Ron, the bachelor party plots, they all just kind of felt a little out of place as well, and the pacing and just the overall satisfaction just wasn't there for me. Now, of course, I like the reveal at the end. I love the stuff between Charles and Oliver sharing their emotions for one another. But again, this is the second to last episode of this season, and it didn't have the punch to the gut type of drama or anything shocking that really sets up the finale in my personal opinion. Which, speaking of the finale next week in the episode, which is titled My Best Friend's Wedding, the synopsis reads, final answers are revealed, but not before the trio faces moral danger at the Arconia wedding. I've stated in the past that I feel like we're going to have a cliffhanger in next week's finale, so I'm preparing myself for that mentally, and I hope you all do the same. When it comes to the wedding, what's going to happen? Like, I feel like something, again, this cliffhanger will be something pretty tragic. Like, what if one of our trio members get hurt, or what if, even worse, one of them gets killed? I'm looking at you, Charles. But seriously, I don't think we're going to get all of our questions answered, especially when it pertains to who's the person that's been watching them from the very beginning of the show, and also that whole little bit of that missing person on the news might be setting up season 5 as well. Now, that's just a clip of the final moments of a larger breakdown, which can be found by clicking on the video on the screen now. Thanks for watching. You all are awesome. Stay safe, and I'll see you all soon.
Yeah.